Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for Startup CL. I know a lot of you are from Startup CL, so that's awesome. Thanks for coming down. I think this might be our biggest crowd. I think if the stragglers come up front, we're going to be really packed for space. But actually, Peter. So Peter Cimino helps Startup Grind a lot. He never asked for anything in return, but I decided to get him something in return. So a week and a half ago, I was out in California for Startup Grind Global Conference, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But we went to Google headquarters, and Peter's into geocaching, so I got him this shirt. It says, "I'm here." Because when Peter's in the house, people take note.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
Sponsors, real quick, I want to thank Dig, this lovely space that we're in. If you don't know what Dig is, Jess is currently somewhere in Europe, so I'll do her pitch. It's a co-working spot. It's a place to meet other entrepreneurs, to access mentors, and it's a good place to be. Your first day is free. You can talk to Vic, who does business development here. If you'd like a day pass, come on down. I'd highly recommend it. Launch New York, who you're going to hear a lot more about. But thank you, Marnie and Launch New York, for supporting us. Kaleidoscope Computers, Dave Field in the back. If your computer gets hacked by the North Koreans, he will come, he'll fix it. We'll talk hockey and Canadian politics. He's a good guy. Culligan Law, Matthew Pelkey, Dave Culligan was here. He's here. Thank you for the beer. It was actually from last event, but it's still good. Unless you guys get sick, then it's not Culligan Law who bought the beer. Nickel City Graphics, Neil Carroll, thank you as always for doing a great job with the videos. So, like I said, last week and a half ago, I was at Startup Grind Global Conference, 4.5 awesome days in Palo Alto. Really, really awesome. I got to meet 60 different directors just like myself from across the world, like literally across the world. And it was very eye-opening, and one thing I learned is entrepreneurship and startups are kind of a global language. So my roommate was from Iran, he's from Tehran. So that's another lesson. You know, we complain about things in Buffalo. I mean, these guys making it happen in Iran. They don't have Facebook, they don't have LinkedIn, they don't have Twitter. The government restricts everything that they do. And I asked him about it, and he was like, yeah, I just do it. Like I get up every day and I do the best that I can. You know, people from Palestine, people from third world countries, and they're still speaking entrepreneurship. They're still facing the same struggles. So I think that was very cool. And then also, Startup Grind as an organization moving forward, they're moving to that global community. So I think that that's really cool. Keep an eye on their website. They're going to do a complete revamp. They're doing global conferences, so it hasn't been announced yet, but hopefully we're going to have one in Toronto, so keep your eye on that. Really fostering, you know, the ecosystems, the global ecosystems. All right, we're going to get started. Marnie LaVigne is an entrepreneur, community builder. She's worked for the University of Buffalo in business development. Her latest role is CEO of Launch New York. She's worked for startups that have gone public, and she's a really nice lady. So I want everybody to get loud. I want some noise. We're going to welcome Marnie LaVigne to the stage, and we're going to start the Startup Grind. So let's hear it.
So fun.
I think we'll start. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Specifically, you've worked for startups that have gone public. What is your involvement with them, and what did you see them doing that was successful?
There was a lot in one question. I think it was like 5 questions. So maybe a little backdrop. So my role is a president and CEO of Launch New York, which is a startup in and of itself, a 501c3. My background, though, is certainly not one that you might anticipate being the lead now for a venture development organization. What happened for me is the same thing that's happening for some people in this room and around this medical campus. I went to graduate school, neuroscience undergraduate at University of Rochester, and then went to graduate school, not in med school, because that was not going to be happening for me, and made a really interesting choice to go into clinical psychology, and it was there that I started my entrepreneurial road, and I never would have known it. So, everyone has said, geez, what do you need a doctorate for, the kind of work you're doing? Well, the reality is I use that education every day, and I ended up, through my mentor at the University of Rochester, getting into my first startup, and pretty much not getting paid anything. But, as a graduate student, that was kind of okay. And so I think for everyone here in this room, the idea that, the path you're going to follow, and the idea that I ended up going through 2 IPOs, never could have predicted it. So, for me, what was important is that I kept my eyes open, and I was open to ideas that people had for what I could do. And the concept of, hey, I could go, continue my internship at the VA hospital where I was working directly with patient care, really important, and I loved it, absolutely loved it, but I had an opportunity instead to go work with a startup. And it was in health informatics, and we were doing what I would call automated disease management programs, helping people follow their medication regimens. And that's what my whole education and my doctoral thesis had been about, is how behavior affects your health and well-being. So I said, what the heck, why not, right? And my husband was pretty good to go along and say, sure, I'll go make money, and you go do whatever the heck that thing is. So we grew a company over in Rochester, New York, called Patient Info Systems, to about 120 employees, and we had a location as well in Philadelphia. And the kind of opportunities you have when you're out there, on the hairy edge, you just don't know. So I remember sitting in the Netherlands in a meeting with a bunch of pharmacists discussing what we might do with our technology on behalf of their effort, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing over here? And the reality is that any of these companies who did succeed, especially in the 90s when an IPO was not such an unusual thing, they took chances. So honestly, it was every one of these groups realizing that you needed to bring a team together. We always had, a multidisciplinary group. We had people who specialized in telecom area. That wasn't mine, that's for sure. We had people who had done other successful startups, as well as had been general managers in companies like Baxter and other well-known healthcare entities. I hadn't done that, right? What I knew was the science of how to create the content of our program. So by pulling everybody together, we were all there, on a prayer and a dream. My first startup, we would meet at Denny's. So Denny's is where we get together, about 5 of us, and the first place we went after that, we actually rented space in downtown Rochester, kind of a lot like this. We didn't have anything. I had folding chairs from home, and whatever else you could dig up. But people being passionate about the idea, very successful. Right now, as everybody knows, I'm sure in this room, IPOs, or an initial public offering, is not that common. So every entrepreneur in this room, that if you do a presentation for money, you're supposed to have a slide that tells everyone how the investors are going to exit. So there's usually 2 answers. One is you used to be, that you were going to go public, or the other that you would be acquired. The public route is a tough one. Back in the day, you really had to be bold. Go talk to the different investors. Go talk to the the different analysts out there. And I was not in a lead role at that time, so I used that as my opportunity to learn. So honestly, being here as head of Launch New York really is the first time that I'm the one who gets to stay up at night making sure we can pay the bills.
So you also worked at the University of Buffalo Business Development, and from our last speaker, Ravini Srihari, and I've heard from a couple other people, they've said the University of Buffalo is not the easiest place to get technology into the marketplace, to get businesses formed from the university. Do you think that's true? And if so, what did you do, or what can be done to improve that?
Yeah, I think that that's a difficult process anywhere. being an entrepreneur and taking, particularly with the complicated technology and getting it to market, that's hard anywhere. I believe that in communities like Buffalo, where we've had a more traditional economy, it's more difficult. But if you look at the history of academic institutions, the reality is that's not what they were built for. They were built to create knowledge and innovation. They were not built to create the new economy. Well, the pressures have changed dramatically, so I really feel like it's an exciting time to re-engineer the model of higher education. And so, while we're working with organizations who are hundreds of years old in some cases, we all have to be there to help make that change occur. So for me, I absolutely love the fact that I had a chance to come back into a university environment and take the entrepreneurial ride that I took and translate that for many people who were in the lab and kind of looked outside and said, I feel the passion of getting this invention out to people, and honestly, that's what excited me. So sure, could I have stayed in academia, back in the day? Yeah, and there's lots of great things about academia and being in a research environment, but the fact that you could take something that you discovered in a laboratory situation and impact the lives of literally thousands or millions of people is so powerful. So I felt like my unique ability was to understand the language of academia at the same time that I could understand the business side. So where we are right now is, if people in this room don't feel it, I don't know, you must have blinders on or something, because it has changed here so dramatically. I started at the university in 03, actually in 05. I was with Buffalo, kind of a Launch New York type organization back in 03 to 05. But we have so many more tools here to actually help both those at the University of Buffalo, whether you be a student, faculty member, or staff, to actually think about taking an idea to market. So we're almost in the opposite situation now, where there's so many resources. The harder part of the challenge is how to navigate them. So I do think that there is a culture that is transforming, but understand that higher ed, that's, they came from a different place than building businesses.
So you transitioned from University of Buffalo business development to CEO of Launch New York. So briefly, what is Launch New York? Where did it come from, and how can it help?
Sure, and I think the transition worked out really well, because in fact Launch New York was created while I was at University of Buffalo. So my role at University of Buffalo was a very non-traditional one. Everything I did there was a startup. The Bioinformatics Center across the street, the portion of the building UB has is about 140,000 square feet, and I said, boy, I've done a few startups in my life, but I've never had 140,000 square feet on my hands. All I know is there's no toilet paper in the bathroom, so we got to do something about it. So that experience of doing startups, in that environment helped me to appreciate what our region did or did not have. So over the years, we made a bunch of mistakes. So I remember back in 05, we would bring some incredible venture capitalists from Boston, and we'd have them come into town, and we'd show them our best researchers. And I'm looking at Jack McGowan, because he remembers those days. He remembers some of the researchers that we horribly put in front of these venture capitalists, and everybody was very cordial, and sometimes we did these events in really cool places like Canandaigua, and everything was just really seemingly perfect. The reality was there was not a chance in the world that those venture capitalists were going to write a check for that startup business. These were so early that we finally said, we've got to stop doing this. It's not helping our reputation here. So so many colleagues in this room worked together to figure out what is it we need. And then I know at the University of Buffalo, what was so powerful in the role that I had there is that I could create new programs. So we started creating all kinds of programs, and I just want to laud you for bringing Startup Grind and really being the next wave of programming that, I know I was looking at our lecture series that we do over at the Center of Excellence, that folks there still do, but, this is the new wave. So first of all, I just want to say to everybody, wherever you are right now, when you recognize something needs to be done, even if it's not for your individual benefit or your organization's benefit, it's a huge impact if you raise that up. And that's what happened for Launch New York. Everyone in town said, we've got some great technology and some great opportunities. But we know we need two other factors. We have to have the talent and the capital to actually make those happen and turn into real businesses that employ people and excite everybody about our transformational economy. Well, that was pretty tough. Capital, we tried bringing those venture capitalists in, and darn it, they weren't writing the checks. They were eating our food, but not writing the checks. So we realized that it would be helpful if we started looking around at other best practice models in the US and beyond, and we did. So what happened is, particularly David Colligan from Colligan Law and Al Culleton, who used to head up the Erie County Industrial Development Agency, and many, many more, Jack extremely involved, and many others in the room. In 2009, we heard the story of what Cleveland had done in terms of transforming its economy through a group called Jumpstart. Nonprofit, venture development organization. Person got up and spoke for our keynote address. Everybody listened to the story and said, wait a minute, you guys gathered up these resources and you suddenly started helping all these companies with their talent and their capital? You're Cleveland, we're Buffalo, we can do this. And honestly, that just set the ball rolling down the hill. And so 2010 to 2012, we actually got a planning grant, and I have to laud the Oshai Foundation is one of the great funders here locally that stepped up. But one thing for everybody in this room is Launch New York is 27 counties. And we did that because we worked with the folks in Cleveland, and we started taking a look at what is the critical mass that it'll take for us to achieve the opportunity, the talent, and the capital. And we determined that that critical mass, you know, initially we had 19 counties, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, and now we include the whole southern tier. So it is so exciting to see what's happening across the region. We officially launched in 2012. We now are up to 10 entrepreneurs in residence, serving companies, at this point over 300 companies across this 27 county area. Right now on our website, launchny.org, we are receiving requests from companies for assistance on the order of 2 to 3 requests every week. I want to point Alex Adama out. He's our Director of Finance and Operations, who very much is the point person for a lot of these new inquiries. We really aren't doing marketing, you know. At an event like this, which is great, but we're not doing major pushes. There is a huge demand to be able to provide the combination of the entrepreneurial support, that talent side, hand in hand with the capital, and that's what Launch New York's all about.
So if I'm an entrepreneur, I have a startup, I have an idea, what could Launch New York help me with specifically, and what type of entrepreneurs are you looking for, and what walks through that process? You know, it goes to Alex's desk, he gets the okay, what happens next?
Yeah, great question. As you all know, there's the phrase out there, the alphabet soup of economic development. There's a lot going on, and there's a new group all the time, VCAMP, it's awesome what you guys are doing. There's just, we're in the middle of it, right? So how do you possibly figure out where you go? One thing I can tell you is Launch New York was not created to reinvent the wheel. We were not created to compete with all of our phenomenal partners. We were created to solve a specific problem, which is that we need to accelerate the growth of businesses in the region in a way that's very visible. So what that meant is we service high growth potential businesses, which we define as businesses in any sector, doesn't matter what the service or product is. We are looking for top line revenue projections of $10 million or more per year within a 5 to 7 year period. We realize they're just forecasts. We'll take companies very early on. If you're actually too far along, if you probably are, I'll say 5 million in either revenues, or you've had that kind of capital coming in, we'd have to take a close look to see if we really are the best group to help you. So you can actually apply online, talk to any one of us. We do ultimately have every company come through the online interview, which is quite quick and painless. At that point, we'll take a look to see what are your needs, actually have a conversation with you, which might be done by phone or in person, to figure out what are your pain points as a startup business, and can we help you with those. We would then assign an entrepreneur in residence to you free of charge, so you don't pay for any of our services. Okay, so that is available. It does turn out, I often meet with companies who don't really meet the high growth potential mark, and frankly, we're not as helpful for those companies. There's a lot of other terrific groups, and it varies by what city you might be in or a rural region. So we'll make sure to send you in the right direction to those colleagues. So with that in mind, you know, right now we do have probably 2 of those 3 companies coming in weekly who do look like high growth potential. And our goal is for them to be on the front page of the paper next year. Okay, we've got to show results as a region if we're going to continue to attract people to live here and want to be part of this economy. So we really feel like that's our niche. So you work with our mentors on an ongoing basis. We don't have a time limitation. We really work with you in a fashion that fits your needs. But I will say we are very driven by evidence-based approaches on working with businesses. So Startup Grind and other groups around the country and the world are using lean startup techniques. We too are using the business model canvas. If you just Google that, you'll see what it's like, almost like a placemat with little squares in it. And that is so powerful because what it does is it gets you focused as an entrepreneur. What are you offering and who cares and who's going to pay for it? You know, we've had a lot of folks, particularly frankly coming from, you know, I'll say academia or technical backgrounds who fall in love with their own technology. But it's a technology, you know, looking for a problem, basically. And those are tough ones, especially if you spend a lot of money moving them along. So our goal is to help you find out quickly, is there an opportunity, you know, help you make a fish, you know, or cut bait situation call if it's time to move on, or help you pivot. And so our mentors are there to help you do that. And then we are, and always have been actually, assisting in leading you to what are some of the sources of capital. You know, there's different kinds of money for different parts of business phase. So we're there to help you with that, and the exciting news from my perspective is we are now fulfilling our full business plan. We have pivoted some, but our original plan always had us providing first in money so that when you need dollars for your proof of concept, you would be able to get that without having to have a match, without having to jump through a lot of the hurdles that right now are still stymieing people in that earliest proof of concept phase. So that's our next horizon.
You have experience raising money. Again, if I'm an early stage company, you know, what should be my mindset approaching fundraising, you know, specifically in Western New York and Upstate New York?
You know, it's actually one of my favorite topics because maybe it's my psychology background that comes with the fore, because I typically will say to individuals who have objections about, well, yes, I talked to an investor, but they want me to do the business that way, or they want me to do A, B, and C, and I want to do X, Y, Z. So I often will say, if you're independently wealthy, you can do whatever you want. Anything short of that, and you really have to ask yourself what kind of business you want. You can have a very high-tech business and not necessarily go raise money. It's just that your business will always stay in a, you know, what we'll call a lifestyle business phase. And I think that's a big decision for every entrepreneur to make. I have to tell you, it is painful when you watch companies go through their growth phases. And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons I learned in growing companies from 0 to 100 plus employees. You know, the CEO of today, the chief scientific officer of today is probably not that same person when you're at 100 people as when you're at 0 and sitting around Denny's. So I guess I would say to you that there are a lot of choices for fundraising. It's best, from my perspective, to lay those out for people and discuss if you want to do more of a slow grow, a bootstrap. Are you okay with being in 3 years, you know, a little bigger than you are now, or did you envision yourself, you know, really hitting that rocket ride? We're all excited about high growth potential, but we also appreciate that, nice steady growth that still has an upside for investors is important as well. So I would just say to you that talking with a trusted person to tell you different fundraising options, because sometimes you take money and sometimes, what comes with that you weren't prepared for. So we, I think as advisors, owe it to all of you to help you understand, what it means if you say yes to this kind of money or that kind of money, whether it's a grant or whether it's equity capital.
When you were growing that team, that and again the name escapes me, you were in Denny's. What were your thought process? Were you thinking, let's go out, let's get money, let's grow, let's get that hockey stick growth, or what was your experience raising money?
Great question. I mean, and honestly, back in that day, I was really green. I'd never taken a business course in my life, and I really knew next to nothing about equity capital. So what I did find is that I was often the spokesperson to talk to those investors when they were really trying to dive into the product. So what I would say, first of all, is you don't have to be an expert in everything now. Just make sure you have that sort of pseudo-expert as part of your team. And for those of you who are not sure you're ready to do this all by yourself, starting with a team is phenomenal, and I think businesses of today, particularly innovation-based businesses, are really complex. So the fact that you need somebody on the team who's going to focus on the product and you can serve in that role. So at that time, I can't say that I drove much of the strategy on fundraising. What we did, and it was called Patient Info Systems ultimately, we started out with an awful name, which was Disease Management Incorporated. Having disease in your company name is probably not good. So we did raise money initially through angel investors in the Rochester area primarily, and those angel investors ultimately led us to an institutional investor. And that actually allowed us to kind of take the pathway to going public.
So it seems that you were very good at networking, and I'm looking out and I'm seeing a lot of very good networkers. I think Joe Peters specifically, great networker. How should entrepreneurs approach that network? How do you build a team, or what have you seen that's worked for networking?
That's such a good question. You bring up really two things. One, networking is a kind of a general thing that everybody should be doing all the time. But the second is also picking a team. So I did just receive a request around this that, there's an individual with a very high-tech business, and they're thinking about bringing a partner on, and how much equity do you give that person? Let me just touch on this whole partnering thing first. Picking your partners is tough, and I sort of just, sorry, I just have to say, I think I followed a path that I couldn't have predicted. Either the good Lord was watching over me, or, I don't know, somehow I had the right people around me and I learned an awful lot. But if you're the lead person making those decisions, or even deciding what team you want to be on, ask yourself the question, do you have the right values? Because often when you get into a business situation, I can recall some pretty sticky spots where investors, and even when we were public, when you go public, you now have a quarterly reporting requirement. The pressure on you as a young business is unbelievable. So in some respects, I think it's a bit of a favor to our young companies that you can't go through an IPO so easily anymore. I had wished to be private at that time because everything's exposed, you're trying to deliver. You need to have people around you who have the same values as you. And where do those relationships start? They usually do start through some kind of networking. So one thing I would just encourage you is to, you're here tonight, so you're obviously people who are willing to go and try out new programs. I think, Evan, you are a great role model, the fact that you went across the country to go attend an international conference. Get outside your region. You got to get outside your region, because it's really easy to believe your own story if you stay here. So, doing that, and then also, sorry, there are too many accolades for Evan on this one. So he dragged me into this thing that I had, again, never expected. So Launch New York, partnering with Startup Grind, we did our first tweet chat last week. Thanks to those of you who jumped in.
Twitter chat.
All right.
Tweet chat is is acceptable too.
See, he's got to help me. He's got to help me. What a neat format. But the fact that we can be in touch with people all over the world, you know, incredible. So suddenly those people show up. You can just pick up the phone or call them, email them, and have a conversation, and you don't have to travel all across the world. So I just would encourage you to keep doing networking. As an entrepreneur, for myself included, you know, it's only 24 hours in a day, so you have to start to be pretty judicious with your time and figure out which things are most important for you at any given time.
Thank you for the accolades. I will say it was 75 degrees in San Francisco when I went, so made the decision a little easier. All right, so maybe if you can provide some examples of, you know, across Upstate New York, companies that entrepreneurs and residents have helped, you know, like what have they done that's been successful and help startups along the path?
Sure, and I'll share what is, no one here from Empire Genomics, but it's one of my personal, you know, pride stories. I feel like a proud parent. But it actually highlights why Launch New York exists. Empire Genomics was a company started based on the Human Genome Project work that was done here in Western New York. So a lot of people don't even know that work was done here. It's amazing that we have, you know, internationally noted researcher here. The original samples actually came from 2 Buffalonians, so you know we were all over that thing. So this great work is going on here, and the opportunity to launch what is essentially a genetic testing company, molecular diagnostic company as they're known today. That's what cropped up. But when I think of the pathway of having that entrepreneur, you know, scientists at the time say, gee, I think I've got something here. I've got a lab that's generating 6 figures in cash every year. You know, we know that there's demand for more of what we're doing. I just, you know, I think about how did that person get help. It took several years, and the first thing we had to do was really find talent. And we were fortunate for someone to come out of Life Technologies on Grand Island, who was willing to take on the CEO role, and Anthony Johnson.
He's the Startup Grant Speaker May 29th, I believe.
Yeah, seriously don't miss it, because really, you know, for me it was taking Norma Nowak as the scientific founder on a bunch of mystery dates, lunches and breakfasts with people who maybe would be interested. And it, you know, with Anthony it worked. So they are now, you know, they're doing very well, they're profitable, but what I have to say is it took them way longer than it should have, and it's because we didn't have the right resources, particularly on the capital side, to help them in the early days. We were able to leverage a series of programs that we operated out of the Center of Excellence, so we had grant dollars to help support some of the right equipment, you know, some of the project monies that were needed, but by and large, it was incredibly difficult to get any angel capital and certainly venture capital. What I can tell you is not only did they get the company set up, they're now about to 18 employees, and they're operating. They've moved out of facilities here on the campus, as we expect everybody to move out of the nest, and they're operating over on Michigan. But they also just did a recent raise of $1 million and you know, another successive increase of, you know, their capacity and their new testing methods. I like to point that one out because they still have a lot of work to do, but I feel almost badly that Launch New York was not around for them back in the day. But they proved that you can make it here, and we hope that Launch New York helps accelerate that process.
So I had a thought, it's kind of interesting. It's like the 7 degrees of startup grind. So we're talking about Empire Genomics. Anthony Johnson is going to be the speaker in May, and that $1 million was raised by Rand Capital. And Dan Penberthy was the speaker last year. So we're talking about communities and ecosystems. It just kind of occurred to me that that was cool that it's all connected.
Well, can I add to that so that a more recent success story in networking across the region is a company called Grainful, and that has, you know, been put out in the paper as, you know, having raised over $700,000, and it's an Ithaca-based company with healthy food products. And, you know, normally they would not be looking at or even thinking that they could connect with dollars up here, but they did. And in fact, the Buffalo Angels, which is another new development actually having an angel fund here, but that's the first investment that the angel fund, which I'm part of, has made, and Jack runs that, and congratulations on our on our first official. But also that was with Rand Capital and I believe some Ithaca investors. So that's a network that never would have happened before. And I do think Launch New York and others helped kind of bring that set of parties together.
All right, this is a pretty serious question. What fictional character would you most like to work with as an entrepreneur? Superhero, fictional character could be the 50 Shades of Grey guy. I've been seeing that.
I'm not going there. All right, well, I'll go the other end of the spectrum. I mean, an obvious one, thinking back to when my kids were younger. So, Fred, is it Fred and George from Weasley? Fred and George Weasley were the ultimate entrepreneurs in the super fun business in Harry Potter, right? So, that just looked like a fun business to me. So I think I'd be having a lot of fun with those guys. They're finding a need. So that's sort of an obvious choice from a literal way of thinking about it. When I think more abstractly, though, superheroes, I would say Superman. And I would say Superman because Superman always looked for a need in a place he could solve a problem, which is the first thing we talk to every entrepreneur about. And then what I love is he was tireless. He was the ultimate serial entrepreneur. He was solving problems every which way, and he was fearless. So being bold and taking your vision and your understanding of the need and the solution and fearlessly going forward, I think Superman figured that all out.
Yeah, he's a good guy. 43 North, I'm looking out, I see, some 43 North contestants. Jonathan's back there, 43 North gear on. Walk us through that, Launch New York. What was Launch's involvement? What did you think about the first year, and what do you see for the future of 43 North?
As many of you know, 43 North came about because of the planning with the Buffalo Billion. So there were actually 6 major areas of investment, and entrepreneurship was one of them. Right. So pretty pleased that that has been on the radar. And then 43 North, you all know the visibility is incredible. I would actually say 43 North, and I'm going to do a shout out for another program, paired with Startup New York, has just given attention to New York State in this region like you couldn't buy it with our normal marketing budgets, which are usually pretty little. So 43 North, I think it's just the beginning, but what we have to do now is to launch New York's mission. We've got to show the successes among all these brave entrepreneurs who've come here. You're coming here with amazing businesses, a lot of spotlight on you. We've got to make sure that you're supported and that you have the ability to accelerate and hit your milestones. I hope that you become the role models of, this isn't easy, it's hard, but if you work in a place where you're supported, you can actually make it happen. So for me, I'm excited about the fact that we're into the incubation phase for the first year's winners. We are eager to see round 2 because I think the more you build that excitement and notoriety of Buffalo as a region that can support new businesses, it will continue and snowball year after year. So for us, we have to look at how do you make the most of 43 North. It's not just an event, it's an entire process, it's a mindset, it's an ecosystem that we all have wanted for a very long time.
If Buffalo is to succeed, it needs more of blank. I ask everybody.
Usually people just say money, we need more money.
Money's the easy answer. What, maybe it's the answer.
No, it isn't. We know it's not the answer. I can think of some scenarios, and again, Jack and I go back far enough in all this that helping some around entrepreneurs get money when they really weren't ready to receive and use the money, not good, not good. So I think it's attitude. It's an attitude where you're passionate, where you are bold, where you're fearless, where we're willing to take the risks to understand that that is going to deliver not only a really satisfying opportunity for you. I mean, who in here doesn't like creating something? How powerful that is. It's just incredible. And whatever role you play in that, entrepreneurship allows you to be attached to it somehow. So I think people being willing to move out of the comfort zone and appreciate that our community is one that can be enriching for everybody, it can be exciting for everybody, but you've got to step out of that comfort zone. So I think it's all about attitude and that culture shift. And not pointing the finger at someone saying, yeah, I gave investment dollars to that company and it crashed. Really looking at the big picture and obviously working within your means of what you're able to do. I will tell you, one of the things I do ask every entrepreneur is, what's your runway? And what I mean is, how long can you go without money? Myself and my colleagues did that for a long time. One of my first startups, I just wasn't smart enough to know that I should have had stock options for doing so. Okay, learned that one the hard way. So I think people appreciating that this isn't an easy road, but it's incredibly fulfilling, and our community will have all kinds of new great opportunities and will attract many more people to come back to the region. I don't worry so much truly about brain drain. I think people want to come back here, but we need to give them the reasons.
Another thing that's come up often is people say Buffalo needs to be more accepting of people that have failed and kind of blacklisting them. So do you think that that's true? And if I'm a startup and Launch New York helps me and I fail, does Launch New York look at that unfavorably? Or if I learn from it and come back, will Launch New York accept me?
I want to believe that we will be very accepting, and in fact, hopefully helping you identify earlier in the road that you're on, the journey you're on, when you need to turn back, and when you need to say, you know what, this idea is something I maybe should not continue with. But we believe that people with real vision and entrepreneurial drive can pivot and be successful in another venture. And Jordan Levy, who's on our board, spoke here, I guess, in December, and gave a great example of how he backed certain entrepreneurs, a team of entrepreneurs, even though he didn't care for the idea, he knew that they would pivot. And I think that if we give the right resources, we don't just leave you out on that dusty road all by yourself. We actually, try to keep you from being out there all by yourself, and maybe turning back and seeing a little earlier when that pivot has to occur. But you absolutely will be here, and hopefully in the future, being able to connect you with resources you need more quickly. For example, not just the money, but we're looking at and piloting a national mentor network. And why are we doing that? We got a lot of great people here. We got 27 counties, isn't that enough? No, it's not enough. Half of these businesses and products and services we're talking about, you've never seen before. We have got to be talking to the best and the brightest with the most experience around the country and around the world. So that's the kind of resource that we hope to make available as a virtual resource. So that entrepreneur who's out there and maybe has, quote, failed, let's figure out what didn't work. Let's figure out what can work with the right input.
This is going to be my last question, and then we'll open it up to you, the audience. What do you see for the future of Launch New York and for City of Buffalo, specifically for entrepreneurs in Buffalo? Upstate New York, Buffalo, Upstate New York.
When we got started with Launch New York, before that and since then, I don't think any of us ever think that we're going to be Silicon Valley. I don't think we necessarily want to be Silicon Valley. I think there's a lot of kind of that hometown feel that we all love here, and we don't want to lose that. So I think we do want to grow a place where people feel like they can come and start a business here and live here and keep on with new ventures. So, you know, I think that's really the direction that we see that Launch New York can be that catalyst. Again, focusing on high growth potential businesses. You know, what's also unique about Launch New York is we are the only organization across the 27 counties focused in this respect. Okay, so we're there to make the connections by working with our partners. We don't reinvent the wheel. But I would hope that I could tell you the following kind of statistics that we've seen in communities like Pittsburgh that we're trying to model ourselves after. Our counterpart group there, who is, you know, a couple decades old, is called Innovation Works. Phenomenal group of people, and they're just doing amazing things and have gotten very involved in the community. They actually can claim that all the venture capital deals happening in their region, 75% of those came through Innovation Works. Okay, we want to be that front end, you know, what's always been known as the Valley of Death. We want that to be the powerful pipeline that is activated and powered by Launch New York.
Awesome. Questions?
Hello. Does a startup have to be in one of those 27 counties to get help from Launch New York?
Such a good question. At the moment, officially, yes. I will tell you that in New York State, we're being requested beyond the 27 counties to kind of take a look. That's something we would consider. As we're funded currently, the 27 counties is our footprint for operation.
So just doing business in one of those counties wouldn't be applicable?
No.
Okay.
No, now if you could, you know, you have to know, many of you know I've spent a lot of time attracting businesses to the region, so we would have a conversation with you. And in fact, one of the companies we're working with right now is out of town, and we're deciding how far do we go. It's a company that right now the founder's based in Virginia Beach. He actually has an energy business with a biofuels additive, and he also has organic products, health and beauty aids. Really neat, got a lot of great contract manufacturers, but I really need him to have some of the business here to really go too far down the road assisting him.
Thanks. When I talk to founders in Rochester and Syracuse and Ithaca, and they talk to me about Launch New York, one of the things they often say to me is, Launch New York, that's a Buffalo thing, isn't it? So could you comment a little bit about that and how you're serving all 27 counties in equal fashion?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. There's no question that Buffalo folks took the lead in raising the initial money for this effort, and we are headquartered here. However, we do now have a much stronger presence in the other counties, and in fact, I can talk to you a little bit about a partnership we just created with the Southern Tier. So we actually have satellite offices at Venture Creations, an incubator at RIT, or one of their RIT buildings, and we also are at the Syracuse Tech Garden, and the newest cool place in Ithaca is called Rev. So that's their downtown incubator, and then also now at Binghamton. So all of that being quite so spread, but ingrained and integrated, if you will, in those facilities is probably within the last 6 to 9 months. We will be formally announcing a partnership with the Southern Tier Hotspot. So what we've actually done there is, and I think this will drive a lot of that visibility across the regions even more. The Southern Tier Hotspot is similar to what you might see Western New York Hotspot. The idea is to bring together the groups who are doing entrepreneurial activities, but again, kind of fragmented, so our 4 main regions each have their own hotspot. Well, the Southern Tier Hotspot, we actually had, quote, a shared entrepreneur in residence, and we said, well, this is kind of silly. So we actually now have formed a partnership where all 4 of their entrepreneurs in residence are also our entrepreneurs in residence. They're essentially co-branded. So now every one of those companies actually will be, you know, part of the Launch New York portfolio as well. So I would anticipate us doing very similar kinds of things, because the reality is we all have, as nonprofits for the most part, we all have a need to get more resources, and the only way you get there is by pooling them. So I think that will help as well. The other thing we've started doing even some time ago, we actually help sponsor programs and groups in other counties. So we're not out there fundraising for sponsorship for events. We don't create new events. The Twitter chat really was kind of the first thing that was brand new, but we also plan on actually featuring a lot of our partners across the ecosystem on those Twitter chats. So we see ourselves as, how do we make the pie of resources bigger? How do we help you achieve your mission all together rather than in a competitive fashion? And thanks for that question, because that's a good one.
The question is so would you guys help as far as like with a franchise, if you were to bring franchise here, would you guys help with something like that? Because I know it has to be met, a certain capital. You guys are like, if I said $5 million and above, so a franchise that's involved with that certain money.
So I think that's one where we want to have the conversation to understand more. If you, said, hey, I want to have a Tim Hortons franchise, how do I get there? We probably would not be the best resource for you. I love Tim Hortons, but so we would want to have a conversation with you to see how to fit. But it is a particular, franchise, one location, couple locations, probably not a great fit for us. There are others in the community who would do probably a better job on that one. But it's worth the conversation, for sure.
Just a quick question. You had mentioned before that there is a paradigm shift when a company goes from like bootstrapped, self-funded lifestyle type business to funded venture. Have you, in your experience, come across any companies where probably get to that point, the owner wants to make a decision from going from self-funded to maybe venture funding, and decides to stay lifestyle, and you see it as a home run and get frustrated that they have to make that step? From your experience, does that happen often, or do most people see it as a home run and just go for broke?
Mixed bag. Buffalo might have a higher percentage, probably does, of the lifestyle-oriented entrepreneurs and CEOs, perhaps than some other regions. I think we haven't necessarily encouraged people to think big. I can tell you, even fundraising, you gotta think big, and that's something that Launch New York is really trying to get attention outside of this community for what's going on here. I do think we've been conservative, particularly in the past few decades, so we do tend to see a lot of CEOs who say they would like to hit the big time, but then when you actually start putting those milestones in front of them, that's a tougher decision to make. So it's a mixed bag. I'm not sure I could even offer a percentage of who goes in which direction. I gotta tell you, we're just doing a lot of education right now, and some of that education is you don't get investors' capital without giving something away. And we still have a lot of people who actually think you should. There is a sort of a free lunch mentality in town here that I think we have to break. So that education is important through programs like this and elsewhere, because not a lot of people understand, if they haven't been in business before, what the cost of doing business is all about.
What is high growth potential groups? Is there a limit or a line when it's just a so-so, or it's a high growth?
Well, again, the easiest answer really is $10 million a year top line revenue in 5 to 7 years. So if we have somebody coming to us, it's like, well, I had someone come the other day and they had 6 figures in 5 years, and then they weren't even, forecasting growth. Now, just know that many times the inventors come, and there are times when they actually underestimate, what the impact of their product or service could be. Or you talk with them and you realize, did you think about these other markets? Did you think about these other applications? But, if someone's walking in the door and they're, $1 million or $2 million, not too often does it look like it could be that high. nonetheless, it's a good conversation to have, and typically there's another resource in town who might be more appropriate. We'll usually refer to Small Business Development Center, Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, SBA SCORE program. I mean, their Women's Business Center, my goodness, we have a plethora of choices. And they really do a much better job with those businesses because, for example, many of those businesses do not need to raise equity capital. And so to lead somebody down that path if they don't need to go there doesn't make a lot of sense. And honestly, I'm no expert in the banking system and what kind of loans are the best, but these other partners are. Yeah, it's a good marriage amongst all of us, figuring out, great, you can go here and we can accelerate you. Startup CEL has just kicked off. So all these partners in town, I think we're really filling in the map of what you need when you need it really well.
Time for one more. Over here.
Hi. What do you take in return to your, for your investment, if anything, and how do you value a startup company? How do you do valuation?
Great question. Right now, we are not currently doing active investments ourselves, but you bring up a good point. The new nonprofit seed fund, which we've just kind of gone out there to note that we're pursuing that very actively right now. We will take an equity position, so we have not determined right now exactly how that'll be structured. We'll probably do convertible debt. That seems to be the best approach typically, so then you don't have to spend a lot of time necessarily on the valuation at a point when it's diminishing returns to spend all of that time. So that's likely to be our approach. And then, we will use more of the follow-on rounds of funding for that valuation exercise.
Awesome. Well, I hope you found it valuable. That's going to conclude it. You're welcome to hang out. Some of us might go to Ulrich's. The next Startup Grind is the 25th of March. Adrian Dayton, Clearview Social, they're a Z80 company. They raised $400,000. 10 of the nation's largest law firms are using their software. They're raising another round right now. He's a really interesting guy. He's got a great story, so I hope you can make it, and that's the 25th. The next Twitter chat is the 18th with Launch New York, so I think we have details in the back. Pitch-in is next Tuesday, and the 21st is Ignite Startups Indig. If you have an idea, it's going to be a collection of a lot of those resources, all those resources that Marnie talked about. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you.